Hello everyone. In this lecture we are going to discuss class 9 topic chapter number 7 statistics practice set 7.2. Now before going to the practice set 7.2 we are going to discuss firstly what is mean by exactly statistics. So statistics is nothing but the core branch of mathematics and that deals with the study of, we can say, is firstly the collection of data. Next we have to analyze it. Whatever information we have given in the data we have to analyze first, and then the graphical representation of it. Second thing, we have to analyze the data, and lastly we have the graphical or the pictorial or diagrammatic representation of a given data, that is known as a statistics. So in the statistics we may collect the data. The data are of two kinds. First is the primary data and the second is we have the secondary data. Now what is mean by exactly the primary data? So primary data is nothing but the data which is collected by sources. The data collected by sources means we have the survey, or we may have the observations, or the experimentation. So the data collected by the survey or the observations or the experimentation is called the primary data, etc. Now what are the advantages of primary data? So we have the first advantage of primary data is data collected which is up to date. Second advantages we have, it is correct and reliable. It is correct and more reliable, we might be says. Now the third advantages we have, it gives the detailed information. It gives detailed information. Now we have the few disadvantages of primary data. So which are the now disadvantages of primary data? So first disadvantage we have is that it can expensive. It can be expensive. And the second disadvantages we have, it is time consuming, or we can say is that requires more time to collect primary data. Now we have few examples of primary data. Like first example we have for a primary data, that is detailed information about each student in a school. I am writing detailed information about each student in a school. Like that way, suppose we are having the name of the student, then date of birth, age, weight, height, something like that. So this is all about the detailed information of each student in a school. Now the second one, we may have the other example of primary data, that is temperature record of each student, or we might be says of each worker in a factory, something like that. Third one, the blood group of each student in a school. Then the last one, the fourth one, information we have details about attendance of every class in a school, like that. So those are the few examples of the primary data. Now the second kind of data we have secondary data. Now what is mean by exactly the secondary data? So the secondary data is the data that have been already collected or readily available from other sources. So that I am writing secondary data is the data that have been already collected by or readily available by, or we can say the from sources. Now sources by means we have from sources. Now which are the sources for the secondary data? So that we may have the sources like newspaper or the internet or the magazine. Those are the sources for our secondary data, etc. and much more. Now we are going to discuss about the advantages of primary data, advantages of secondary data. So which are the advantages of secondary data? First advantage we have, very easy to access. Very easy to access. Already it is collected by the sources, means like the newspaper, internet and magazine. So it is very to access. It can be readily available somewhere else. On the internet we might be says the newspaper, magazine and etc. Second advantage we have, low cost, or it might be available at free. So or it might be the free source. Now the third one advantage we have, it is time saving, required less time to collect the secondary data. Fourth one advantage we have, anyone can collect the data. Anyone can collect the data. Now few disadvantages we have for the secondary data. So that which are the disadvantages of secondary data? First disadvantages we have, it is unreliable. It is unreliable. Second disadvantages we have, no control over the data quality, because it is already collected by someone else. So we have no control over data quality. Next to it, the third disadvantage we have, as it is collected in the past, so it may be out of date. So that we are writing as it is collected in past, so it is or it may be out of date. Now which are the examples of secondary data? First example we have collecting detailed information about student and submitted it to the state board. Submitted to state board. This is the first example of secondary data. Now second example we have for the secondary data, collection of score of cricket player collection or collecting score of cricket player from, we might be says, the newspaper or the internet. This is the other example of secondary data. So that now what is the difference between the primary data and the secondary data? Primary data, it requires more time, while secondary data, it is readily available, so needs less time. Primary data, it is up to date and detailed information, while secondary data, it is taken from already collected data, so it is not necessarily up to date, it may lack in the details also. Now for the primary data, it is collected and reliable, and secondary data, it may be less reliable. Now look at the practice set 7.2. Classify the following information as a primary or the secondary data. Within it, first sub question we have information of a attendance of every student collected by visiting every class in a school. So it will take more time to collect the data, and it will gives us the detailed information about the present students of each class. So that's why it is the example of primary data. Look at the second example. We have the information of heights of students was gathered from the school records and sent to the head office as it was to be sent urgently. So now it is already collected data, that is heights of students was gathered from school. So who is the source here? The school be the source who's collected the data of heights of each students in a school, and we have to submit it to the head office. That means it is already collected data, so it is of the form secondary data. It will take less time to collect. Now look at the third sub question. In the village Nandpur, the information collected from every house regarding students not attending the school. So it will take lots of time because we have to visit each and every house of the Nandpur village. That's why it is time consuming, and gives us the detailed information about each students, those who are attending and those who are not attending the school. So it is primary data. Now look at the last sub question number 4. For science project, information of trees gathered by visiting a forest. Again, it will take lots of time because we have to visit the forest and collect the information of trees from the forest. So it will take lots of time, and it will gives us the detailed information about each tree, so that it is the primary data. Hence here we have our practice set 7.2. Thank you.